Welcome to Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson. Thanks for joining us. Our topic today, ultra-processed foods and beverages, what they are, what makes them so bad, and most importantly, how to get them out of our diet. My guests are Trevor Connor, CEO of the Paleo Diet, and Dr. Griffin McMath, a naturopathic doctor of medicine and chief content officer at the Paleo Diet. Welcome to both of you. Thanks for being here today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us on the show. We've been looking forward to this.
So, Trevor, I wanted to start out with you. First of all, we hear about processed foods, and then this new term that we've been hearing a lot about lately, ultra-processed foods. Can you talk about what the difference is?
Yeah, and if anybody's really interested in this, there's actually a scale that defines this. It's called the NOVA classification. You can look this up. Four categories: ultra-processed, processed, minimally processed, and unprocessed. Processed foods are where you take something like fruits or meat or foods that you would recognize from nature, and you do some processing with them. You might add salt, you might add sauces, things like that to it. Ultra-processed food is a step beyond that, where basically you can't recognize the original food. There might be parts of some fruit in there, parts of some meat in there, but it's been heavily processed to the point that it's just its own thing. That's the simplest and easiest way to think of it.
So, Griffin, we talk about things like, well, we know, Oreos and Twinkies are ultra-processed food, but how much of the food that we eat are what we would call ultra-processed?
That really depends on someone's individual diet. There are people who really stick to a minimally processed or a very, very whole foods diet. And there are those who, whether circumstance or lifestyle choices, really opt for more of an ultra-processed diet. So here at the Paleo Diet, we promote a diet that is obviously minimally processed. So I would say about 85% of what we promote would be minimally processed, at least.
Trevor, give us an idea of some of the things, like if you were to walk into the grocery store, how many of the other things that we see, especially in the middle of part of the grocery store, are what you would classify as ultra-processed?
So you just hit the nail on the head, and people have heard this all the time. If you're trying to eat healthy, stick to the sides of the grocery store. Once you start getting into the shelves, that's where you're getting into more processed and particularly ultra-processed foods. Go down that snack aisle, and it's pretty much all ultra-processed foods. I'm not telling people completely cut those out of your diet, but the recommendation here is spend more time in the fruit and vegetable section, spend more time in the meat aisle, get those less processed foods, and make those the bulk of your diet.
But Griffin, some of the things that are in the middle of the store are okay, right? So I'm thinking like canned beans, canned tomatoes, frozen vegetables. Those aren't really like in the center of the store. Can you talk about some of the things that are okay that are still in the aisles?
Yeah, I think to your other question, now that I'm thinking about it, a majority of the U.S. food supply really is ultra processed. So you're looking at maybe 2/3 to 3/4 of our food supply right now. I think we have to be really careful when we determine that something is ultra processed, that we're also not demonizing it right away and saying that this is absolutely bad. I think there are some things that you do have to go to the center of the grocery store to pick up, and that might be oils that you cook with or vinegars that you put on a salad. So not everything is bad that you're going to find at the center of the grocery store. That doesn't suddenly, like walking in the middle of the grocery store, like your health just takes a tank. But there are things that you want to look for when you are looking at a packaged good or a processed good, and that's really how it's made. It's really the quality of the ingredients. You want to look at something and think, okay, from what's the whole food item this came from, and how many steps did it have to take to get to this spot? Not that it's a cold and fast, hard truth, but the more steps that it takes to get to that packaged process, it may or may not be less good for you. And that can be a quick, easy way to determine when you're holding up an item at the grocery store. Again, quality of ingredients. So I like shopping for my ultra processed kind of indulgences that might have organic ingredients, or it may not have as many food dyes in it or other additives. So looking at the ingredient list, does it have so many other things added to it to make it that tasty treat that's in front of you? And is it really necessary? Probably not. It may end up being harmful for your health.
So Trevor, she did kind of hit the nail on the head when she said tasty. We love these foods. We love them so, so much. And this is not a coincidence, right? I mean, don't these massive, giant food companies just spend big bucks to make these products irresistible in so many different ways? Not just the taste, but also the way it even feels in our mouth, the mouth feel, they say. Talk about how addictive these ultra-processed foods are, and not by accident.
You know, there's literally a science to this. When I was going to school at CSU and I was taking my nutrition classes, I had a teammate who was in the food science department, which was a completely different department. That's where you learn how to make products that people really want to eat and want to buy. And I used to love having conversations with him. He actually brought me into his lab and showed me a lot of their processing, which was completely different from what we were learning in the nutrition department. And it really came down to, you wanted something that would move off the shelves. You had four main ingredients. You had some sort of fat or oil, you had salt, you had sugar, and then you had a flavoring. And I still remember he showed me this whole shelf of flavoring. It was just these little liquids, and he pulls one bottle off the shelf and says, "Here, smell this." And it smelled like a hamburger. It was really, really strange. But there is a science to this mix of fat and sugar and salt, which are the things that we crave the most. You put those into a food, you add a flavoring to it, and people are going to buy it. But, you know, as we're pointing out here, that's where you get into this very ultra processed food. We might crave it. It might taste really good, but it's just not good for our health. And that's not what they're focused on. He used to love to talk to me because he actually wasn't really learning about what was healthy.
They are so good, and they know we want healthy, so they can put on the label and sort of make it look healthy. So they can take up a 5-pound bag of sugar and say, "Hey, low fat," and people are like, "Yay, this must be healthy." Talk about some of the marketing techniques to make these things look healthy when they're not.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the ways that marketers do this is something called greenwashing. So if I just give this kind of green, this feel of, oh, it is earth friendly, or like you said, I'm gonna slap on the name of some type of health food trending term onto something that really has nothing to do with that product to make someone feel better about choosing theirs. There are regulated terms in the US, and there are terms that right now you can just use willy-nilly, and they mean something to the consumer because of what they've heard online or in the news or on social media. I think all natural is a really great example. That doesn't really necessarily mean anything. You know, we know that for even eggs, people looked for cage-free for so long, and that didn't necessarily mean the best quality either. So really doing your research on what is making you make this decision at the point of purchase. Are you drawn to some of these words, and do you actually know what that means in that moment? It really makes a big difference.
Yeah, another big one that you see often on foods that are clearly unhealthy, they'll put high protein when it's really an unhealthy food. Talk about, Trevor, how bad these foods are for us. We know that they contribute to the astronomical obesity problem that we have in the United States. Talk about some of the other effects that these ultra-processed foods have on our health.
They are highly inflammatory. You know, we have this incredibly robust, incredibly complex immune system in our bodies. And the way the immune system is designed to work is you have some sort of threat that comes to your body, the immune system ramps up, it gets inflammatory. Inflammation isn't good for us, but if you're dealing with some sort of bacterial or viral infection, it's worth it for a short period of time. But then the immune system's designed to come back down and really just remain at a very low level. What these foods do is really bypass a lot of our protective mechanisms, and they cause the immune system to get inflamed, and they keep it chronically inflamed. And that's the issue. We're not designed to be like that. And when the immune system is chronically inflamed like that, over time, it's not immediate, But over time, that starts leading to all these diseases that we've now come to accept, like cancer, like heart disease, like autoimmune conditions. A lot of these are just a result of having a really bad diet that just causes this aberrant immune system that's constantly inflamed.
Massive inflammation. Okay, we're going to take a break and be right back with Trevor Connor and Griffin McMath. Our topic today, ultra-processed foods. Stay with us. Welcome back to Healthy Living. We're talking about ultra-processed foods with Trevor Connor and Griffin McMath of the Paleo Diet. And Griffin, you talked about it a moment before. It's okay to go to the middle of the store to get the right kind of oils. And we know that there are certain kinds of oils that are in ultra-processed foods that are really bad. Talk about the good oils and the bad oils.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about oils is you have to think about heat point and how you're using it. So an oil isn't necessarily inherently bad unless it's been really put through the ringer by the time it gets to the bottle or the packaging. I typically like to think about how it's been processed, how I'm going to use it, how the oil is currently being stored, since it's a fat that's going to be going into your body. Typically, I prefer to purchase my oils in glass bottles, so that it's not sitting there in plastic the entire time. I look for an oil that matches what it is going to be indicated for in the meal. So if I want to be cooking some type of sweet treat like a mousse that's going to be going into the refrigerator, I'm careful about using coconut oil because it's going to solidify and then get a little chunky later. If I want to use something at high heat, I'm going to look for an oil that shows me the smoke point on the labeling right there. And then I'm not going to use that oil beyond that temperature. So I might use an avocado oil at a certain heat point. Flaxseed oil, I would use not for heat at all. I might put a little bit on a salad, but that would be an example. So look at the way that it's stored, look at how you can tell right there on the label how it's been processed or refined, and then look at the smoke point and understand the source of that oil. So a walnut oil, an avocado oil, all of these have different uses for how you put it in your food and your diet.
Trevor, clearly you advocate not eating processed foods, just avoiding them altogether. There is a movement, there's a lot of talk right now about in the future possibly making food companies take out some of these preservatives and some of the dyes and some of these questions. How realistic do you think that is given the power of these food companies? And is there really a way to make ultra-processed foods healthier?
In terms of changing these larger companies, I think that's really people having a voice and saying, we want these other types of foods. And they do here. I'm following a lot of the industry news, and there's been more and more of a push from consumers of saying, we don't want ultra-processed foods. We want to get away from that. We want to eat less processed. And you're seeing a lot of these bigger food manufacturers saying, okay, that's what people want, so that's what we're going to give them. So it really comes down to people saying, this is what I'm going to buy. This is what I want.
Is it possible to get all of these questionable ingredients out of processed foods? Do you think that food companies are going to comply with that request? Or can we even mandate it? There's a lot of talk about, the new administration mandating this among these giant food companies, and it seems kind of like a heavy lift.
Honestly, I'm going to give you my opinion. I don't think we can ever mandate that. I really think it's on us to just say, we're just not going to eat as much of that food. And look, I will tell you, this will probably be a bit of a surprise. I have my pizza every once in a while. I have my popcorn. I love it. I'd hate to see this stuff completely go away. People should have their enjoyments. It's just for us as a consumer say, we want to be healthier. So we're going to shop mostly in the fruits and vegetable aisles, mostly in the meat aisles, get the less processed food, and just have our periodic treats. I think that's for us to make that decision.
Interesting. All right, we're going to take another quick break and be right back with Trevor Connor and Griffin McMath of the Paleo Diet talking about ultra-processed foods. Stay with us. Welcome back to Healthy Living. We're talking about getting ultra-processed foods out of our diet. Trevor, what's so bad about these seed oils? A lot of people don't pay attention to the type of oils that they're consuming, but the seed oils are particularly bad, right?
Yeah. So people hear a lot about saturated fats being bad for them, but something that I actually think is even more important. is what's called the ratio of polyunsaturated fats in our diet, which is hard to find on labels. Everybody's heard about omega-3 fatty acids. There's also omega-6 fatty acids. These seed oils are really high in omega-6 fatty acids. And when we eat a lot of omega-6 and not a lot of omega-3s, try not to go too deep into the science here, but this is kind of an interesting thing to know about. We produce a lot of something in our bodies called cyclooxygenase 2 when we eat a lot of those omega-6. That particular term isn't that important, but why that's really relevant is if you go to the pharmacy and you buy a painkiller, most painkillers are just cyclooxygenase 2 inhibitors. They cause pain. And you see a lot of people who go to their doctor and say, I'm constantly in pain. I wake up in the morning, my joints are killing me, my muscles are aching. Do something for me. And they call it chronic fatigue syndrome or all these other terms. And really all they have to do is just increase the omega-3s in their diet and get these seed oils out, get the omega-6 out of their diet.
That is absolutely fascinating because so many people struggle with pain. So,
Right.
Griffin, you know, we're talking about ways to improve our diet. It is overwhelming, especially for regular people who just eat the SAD, the standard American diet, which is indeed sad. Talk about the first steps that people need to make to start eating better. And your company is called the Paleo Diet, so obviously you recommend that. What would you say would be like the first few things that people can do?
I think the first thing is understanding your relationship with food. First and foremost, one of the things that we often do in an appointment with a patient when there's anything to do with diet is we have to stop and collect information. Let's take a step back and start asking questions. Let's be an observer to our own experience and relationship with food. Oftentimes, the way we're able to collect this information and to really have an accurate understanding is by doing something called a diet diary or a food log. And so you might start writing down, I ate this around this time, I drank this with it, this is the reason why I picked this, or this is how I felt an hour later. This helps you understand why you're making certain choices. Maybe you start to recognize you're making these choices because you're always in a rush, because you aren't able to stop and plan and think about something ahead of time. Maybe you're starting to connect the dots that if you eat this particular food here, you know you're actually going to be bloated in about 30 minutes to an hour. You might start to recognize that in times of stress, you are starting to reach more for sugary foods that maybe keep you awake later in the evening. So these types of things, the first thing to do is really to understand your relationship with food. And one of the best ways to do that is to start writing it down. Why you picked something, if you were in a rush, what it consisted of, what you drank, and then how you felt probably within 30 minutes to an hour. Put this information together, start to connect the dots, and then start to work your way backwards from there. So if you know you like a sweet treat and you're someone who can't or won't go cold turkey, not for everyone, maybe rather than picking out the ice cream that we kind of all love that has 8 different, ingredients in it, and that pint of ice cream, maybe you can opt for a fruit bowl with dark chocolate instead, right? So there's ways to kind of step down or stepwise this transition. And there are ways to just reframe why you're reaching for certain foods. So if we stick with the dessert example, maybe you've always imagined that after every meal, you need some type of closure to that meal. It's not complete until I have a dessert. Ask yourself, is that really necessary? And can I change up the tradition that I have at the end of the meal? Maybe the treat at the end of the meal is the whole family goes on a walk and you get those happy feelings from that instead. So really, it comes down to your relationship with food, traditions you have with it, and the meaning that you draw, and then making decisions in a stepwise manner to go a little bit more towards a whole foods diet.
Take baby steps. All right, we're going to take one final break and be right back with Griffin McMath and Trevor Connor of the Paleo Diet. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking about how to get ultra-processed foods out of our diet. And unfortunately, we're almost out of time, and we've only scratched the surface. Trevor and Griffin, can you tell our viewers where they can find out more information about this subject and about you?
So the easiest place to go, we have a website. It's www.thepaleodiet.com. Dr. Cordain, our founder, who is an inventor of the Paleo Diet, he also has a couple books, The Paleo Diet. He has one for athletes. We're actually, sorry to give a bit of a plug, but we are working right now with him on his final book. It's a book on longevity, which should be coming out this summer. And that's where we really dive into, everybody's heard about vitamins and minerals. There's new research showing there's what we call longevity nutrients or longevity vitamins that you don't get in ultra-processed foods. You really get in natural foods that help us live a longer, healthier life. So we're really addressing that in this next book.
And Griffin?
Yeah, well, you can also find us on social media at the Paleo Diet or Real Paleo Diet. And then I strongly recommend you sign up for our newsletter as well, because we talk about advice, everything from on the plate to off the plate, to help you improve your health and live a strong and healthy life.
All right. Well, Trevor, Connor, Griffin, McMath of the Paleo Diet, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
And thanks to you for tuning into this edition of Healthy Living. I'm Lori Johnson, and we'll see you again next week.